Hi, Gerhard Bloom here, once again looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So today I would like to look at this assertion that religious belief, in particular Judeo-Christian commitments, are superstition, right? They're the legacy of superstition, and liberal humanism, Enlightenment humanism, that gets you where you need to go, right? Morally speaking, humanism, atheistic humanism, gets you to the moral commitments that make the world a much better place. We can keep our commitment to moral responsibility without the baggage of darkness and superstition, right? I've spoken previously in a previous video that I don't think that atheism scales, right? There can be very decent atheists, moral, upright citizens. It doesn't scale. And you look at human societies up until very recently. I mean, in evolutionary terms, it's a literal blink of an eye, right? Every population group ever studied historically has had religious belief and commitments. That doesn't make them all equal, as we'll see. But and one of the arguments for this view of mine that religious belief or atheism doesn't scale, right? One of my arguments for that is you look at fascism, you look at communism, and you look at the social justice ideology. They are all dangerous religion replacing religions. I apologize. I'm going to have to read much of this text just to keep the argument straight, right? So traditional belief in the West is rapidly eroding, and with it, its commitment to biblical principles. But contrary to the new atheists, religious belief isn't irrational, it's non-rational, right? It's a commitment of faith. And they would have you believe this commitment of faith is irrational, right? Faith, who needs faith? We have science, right? We have science, we have evidence, we have rational inquiry. We'll see. This is a problem. It's a narrative they've been telling themselves. Convince me for decades, until I started writing this book and the arguments just started to unravel as I'm presenting my arguments against this social justice toxicity. I realized no, they are mistaken. The commitments of secular humanism, contrary to their ad campaigns, are equally grounded in belief, not reason, right? And I know Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, I've got on my shelf books by each and every one of them, and they're excellent thinkers, excellent scholars in their respective fields, absolutely outstanding. But on this question of religious belief and moral principles, I think they are wrong, right? Yes, they share many of moral commitments and values that I do, right? I happen to share them, right? This is not accidental, right? If I'm right, their moral views, their moral commitments are an unacknowledged legacy of the Judeo-Christian worldview, right? David Hume argued as far back as the 18th century, there is no compelling argument that gets you from an observation of the world to a conclusion about what you should do, right? What you observe in the world simply is, right? What you should do, right, is grounded in your value preferences, right? So in other words, you can't make claims about what you ought to do based on observations about what is. This is known as the fact-value distinction, right? Now in everyday society, in everyday world, we make these sorts of claims all the time. Well, you should do this, you should do that. And they work to the extent that they do, because at least in the West, there is broad agreement about basic underlying values, right? But as I discuss in this book of mine, Deconstructing Social Justice, these orienting values, our basic orienting values, are rapidly eroding as a result of this social justice ideology. And it's seriously undermining social cohesion. Right? The new atheists, you may not be surprised to know, make all sorts of value claims. But these value claims, they're disguised as rational deductions based on impartial observations, right? These are claims about what we, as moral agents, should do, right? This is a moral commitment, right? Scientific observation and rational reflection just don't get you there, right? For the new atheists, rational reflection alone should deliver a commitment to human dignity, right? You think about it long enough, oh, we have human dignity. Right? It is not found under a microscope. It is not. How is it that Stalin, Mao, and Hitler all failed to recognize the truths, the moral truths of secular humanism? They knew their policies would produce mass deaths and untold suffering, right? They did not care, right? They made observations of the world but had very different value preferences, right? Their moral commitments were elsewhere. Each was, in their own way, following Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche recognized that absent a belief in a biblical God, Christian morality, and with it, its principle of the intrinsic dignity of the individual, was radically untethered to observations of the world, right? For Nietzsche, we are absolutely free to posit alternative moral values, a new hierarchy of values. He famously argued, oh God, sorry, it's slipping my mind here. But at any rate, establish a new hierarchy of values, right? And he's correct about this, right? Once you get away from biblical belief, you are radically free to posit your own. This could be fascism, this could be communism, could be this social justice movement. These are all religion replacing religions, right? For Hitler, a national socialist, right? You caught that? Socialist, a national socialist. The Nazi Party is the National Socialist German Workers' Party, right? Right. Doesn't sound like a conservative to me, right? No, Hitler was not a conservative, right? So for Hitler, the sick and the weak were a strain on national strength and racial purity, right? Sympathy towards them was nothing less than moral cowardice. You could not follow the logic of the observations of nature. For Nietzsche saw, as Tennyson argued, nature was red, tooth and claw, right? So it was moral cowardice that you didn't do away with the sick and the weak, right? So he had the eugenics program, right? Killing, crippled people, sick children, monstrous. Where did he get this notion? Oh yeah, he got it from the progressives of the age, right? The liberal progressives of the age were all aboard the eugenics program, right? This is a fact, right? And the socialists, right? Socialists, communists, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, et al., right? The whole litany of them, all were firmly convinced that their duty was to history and humanity. The individual, meaning you meant absolutely nothing. So about 100 million people were sacrificed to the altar of the greater good, right? To history and humanity. 100 million lives taken. And I'm not talking about lives lost in war. No, these governments killed their own people to bring heaven on earth, right? To impose their utopian vision on the world, right? So notwithstanding the universality of religious beliefs, all religions are not created equal, and they have very different moral consequences. So how is it, if a religious commitment isn't grounded in reason or science, we can make judgments as to its worth? Well, apologies to the atheists out there, but I think the Bible has it exactly right? you shall know them by their fruits. Matthew 7:15-20, right? So the fundamental principle in Judeo-Christianity is that all people have equal moral worth. What happens when you look at Buddhism? Right? Well, the sick and the suffering are sick and suffering as a consequence of their misdeeds, either in this life or the last, right? This is karma, right? Hinduism. Well, you are assigned at birth into a rigid caste, right? A fixed moral hierarchy. Some people are born literally untouchable. And yes, that's as morally appalling as it sounds. In Islam, your moral worth is predicated upon your membership in the Ummah, the Islamic family. And social justice, right? What fruit have they given us, right? Well, they're all poisonous. And that's little Monty trying to hog a little of the limelight, right? Yeah, social justice ideology, poisonous nonsense. And their commitments are as religious as the committed Jew or the committed Christian. But remember my argument that I stole from the Bible, right? By their fruits shall you know their worth, right? So social justice, all poisoning. Let's look at the biblical tradition here for a moment, right? It has given rise to human rights, the rule of law, democracy, and unparalleled prosperity. That's exactly right. What's the relationship between freedom and prosperity? There's an excellent book out there, Superabundance. And superabundance is, I think, one of the most important works of the 21st century. It is absolutely brilliant study of human achievement and unparalleled prosperity in the world, in this climate, hysteria, absolute nonsense. We have, in their words, an absolute superabundance on everything in the world. And the people improving the fastest are the world's desperately poor, right? They are moving out of poverty at an unparalleled rate. Unless, of course, social justice ideologues and the socialist utopian dreamers screw this thing up. And they may very well. And this climate hysteria, right? Moving exactly in the wrong direction. Their policies can very easily plunge the world's poor into starvation, right? We could see millions of people starve to death. This war on fossil fuel and artificial fertilizers just could lead to catastrophic results, right? So, no, the commitment to Judeo-Christian beliefs, not irrational, it's non-rational. We all need to believe in something. All need to believe in something. And this is where I stand, right? At any rate, I discussed these issues at length and this social justice lunacy. I will deconstruct the various arguments, the continuing black oppression narrative, nonsense, this radical gender ideology, poisonous nonsense, destroying lives, the patriarchy, absolute nonsense, the war on the family, which is happening, deconstruct the nuclear family, will have and is having catastrophic consequences, and many other issues. I bring the data, right? At any rate, I thank you for your time and attention. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a thumbs up. Please do check out my book. It's an important work. Not important because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues could not be more important. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.